Hello, and welcome to Cornell University and the Cornell S.C. Johnson College of Business, and what I know is going to be a fascinating discussion today on the business of food. I'm Ed McLaughlin, and will serve as your host and moderator of the discussion today. I've been a faculty member at Cornell for 38 years as the Robert G. Tobin Professor of Marketing and Director of Cornell's Food Industry Management Program. I'm now serving, for the second time actually, as the interim dean of the Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management at Cornell. Like all of you, I really wish we could be together in person for this discussion today. At the same time, I'm really excited that one of the silver linings that we've learned in the education business over this past year is how easy it is to bring together people from literally all corners of the world for conversations like this one today. And I couldn't be more excited about the topic today. There has been perhaps no other single sector of the world's economy that has been more impacted by the COVID pandemic than the food industry. And the realization, often for the first time by many, about the absolutely vital nature of this industry. Most people simply never took the time to realize the incredible number of steps, technologies, challenging complications required to produce food, to transform food, to transport food, and to get all these food products to supermarket shelves so that consumers have something to eat. The pandemic, of course, has placed tremendous strains on the world economy and the food supply chain. And for the most part, the industry has responded like the champion that many of its participants always understood it was, but the same status was not always realized by the average consumer. Today, that's all changed. We've got four outstanding panelists with us today, and I'm proud to say, all Cornellians. Each has had a long length of achievements and awards, but today I've asked them to limit themselves to a 2-minute introduction to themselves and their business. Todd Schnook, could I start with you?
Sure. Thank you, Ed, and hello, everybody. I'm Todd Schnook. I'm the chairman and CEO of Schnook Markets based in St. Louis, Missouri. We're 111 stores in 4 states in the Midwest. We were founded 82 years ago by my grandmother, actually, Anna Donovan Schnook. So we take a lot of pride in the fact that we were founded by a female in the depths of the Depression. And we are a 3rd and 4th generation family-owned company. I'm actually the 3rd member of the 3rd generation to run our company. And all 3 of us actually are Cornellians. 2 graduated from the ag school and 1 the business school also, and I'm a graduate of the business school.
Thanks, Todd. Mr. Pror?
Thanks, Ed. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Jim Pror, and I run a company that has a media operation in the food industry. I come from a family, though, that has long been involved in the fresh produce industry. My great-grandfather was running a produce company back in the Ukraine, and my family did for many generations before that. He emigrated to the U.S., and my grandfather, father, and myself continued in that. I fell to journalism, launching a magazine called Produce Business 35 years ago, and have continued to work with Cornell, both myself as a student, and now I have a son who's in the hotel school. And this follows on many, many, many speeches and lectures I've been privileged to give at Cornell. I also work to bring students at both Dyson and the hotel school and the ag school to a number of live events we do, such as the New York Produce Show and Conference, the London Produce Show and Conference, the Amsterdam Produce Summit, and a whole bunch of others. So it's a great pleasure to be here, Ed, and to try and share a little bit from the world of fresh foods with our group today.
Thanks, Jim, so much for joining us. Susan, you're next.
Great. Thank you, Ed. So I'm Susan Garen. I am a hotelie, and I have two children who both graduated from the hotel school as well, so through and through. I guess different from Jim and Todd, I don't come from a family of food people, other than they like to eat a lot, but past that, not food people. World Finer Foods is a company that most of you won't know, but our history dates back over 75 years. What World Finer Foods does is we actually own our own brands, and we also represent about another group of brands. And so together we have about 50 brands under management. And our charge is to build these brands in the specialty or premium space. And some of our brands include Reese, the artichokes and hearts of palm, Tai Ling, Chinese food, which I think some of you had maybe at Diwali or some of the other events in Chinese New Year, Wellington crackers, and High Ground coffee. On the third-party brand side that we don't own, Bon Maman, the jam, is one of our brands, as well as Coleman's mustard, Marmite, if anyone's tried that, Way Better chips, and a few others. And we sell nationally in the U.S. across all channels, whether it be grocery, retail, e-com, convenience, club stores, and food service. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Susan. Welcome. Mike?
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Thompson, and I'm the president and CEO of Fair Oaks Foods. We're located in southeast Wisconsin. We have 3 facilities here, and we provide high-quality meats and non-meat products. If you like products like breakfast sausage, bacon, poultry, and other ground meat products, I'm your guy. And recently we've invested and embarked into the alternate meat space as well. So that's kind of exciting and new and innovating for us as well going forward. We ship to mostly North American destinations, but we do ship to some international markets as well. And about 75% of our company is in the food service segment, and then about 25 or maybe 30 is on the private label retail side. So I wasn't in food all my life. Coming out of Cornell, I actually did the corporate route, but on the food side, and worked for some great companies, including McDonald's, and jumped into entrepreneurship in 2003, and had the company since then, and it's been great.
Outstanding. Thanks, everybody. Well, let me start out by throwing out a kind of a broad blanket question to all of you. The retail sector, like the food industry, Todd, I'm going to start maybe with you. The retail sector has been massively evolved over the last 14 months in so many ways. I suspect our listeners today are familiar with the fact that restaurants were shut down and toilet paper was hard to find and all the other stories now part of our folklore. But I'd like to know from you, a supermarket operator, what changes or consequences of the COVID pandemic really surprised you, caught you off guard in a way that, you could never imagine happening a year ago?
Well, how long do we have? I never knew that there were so many bread making machines that were out in people's closets, and that so many people took up bread making and baking that we ran out of yeast. Sort of an item that you wouldn't think about, but it's just a broad range of items, the masks and the social distancing, and you mentioned product supply, and how we change things around operationally in our stores. And the idea of plexiglass coming between our teammates and our customers was a horrifying idea at first, because it's all about the relationship. But it does come back to, what do you have to do to make sure your teammates are safe, your people are safe. And so we did all those things, and things like single line queuing, and going to single entrances and exits, and just a lot of things that you don't think about in the beginning, but you do them, and some of them actually, and I think we might get to this a little bit later, they'll be long lasting moves.
Speaking of items that you never expected to have shortage in, like yeast, I understand there was also a shortage in plexiglass to build the kind of checkout stands that you were hoping for.
There ended up, we fortunately were an early adopter there, and we had a source, and were able to get that up really in a matter of maybe a week, and we just we took our maintenance crews and fanned them out across our stores, and not only did we had the at the checkout stands, but all of our service counters and any place where there was that face-to-face interaction.
What kind of plans do you have for that plexiglass in the future? I'm assuming that once the economy opens a little bit more, it will be coming down, or not?
That's an internal debate right now. It's we have to have a lot more behind us, I would say, in terms of the disease and people's comfort level until we make that decision. We've told our team that don't expect to get rid of masks, don't expect to get rid of the plexiglass for some time, because we're just not to the point yet where anybody feels comfortable.
Mike Thompson, how would you answer the same question? What has surprised you most, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I tag on to Todd. I mean, I'll answer in two parts, but the first, the plexiglass, the social distancing. I mean, we went through that in our manufacturing facilities, and I think what's coming out of there are good practices for safety. I mean, for individuals. So I think that would be kind of number one for us as we debate it as well. But to me, right now, I don't think it's going away. What surprised me the most, really, the whole thing was just a shock. So I don't know. It was I had too many surprises, but maybe just at the concern that everyone had, on this overall, I think was a little bit groundbreaking for us from just keeping employees safe, because that just became our number one cry, to keep everyone safe so we could continue to manufacture during the pandemic.
Susan, what would you say to that question? Someone who sources the great majority of her product internationally, the supply chain disruption has got to have been crippling.
Yeah. Interestingly, in the beginning of the pandemic, it actually wasn't that crippling. It actually has changed during the period. And I think we can talk about freight, and all the issues today are worse than they were at the beginning of the pandemic. I think for me, the most surprising thing was our people, how quickly they adapted to remote working. How seamlessly that went, and also how many people we hired through video for salespeople, for marketing people, finance during the pandemic. It was unbelievable, and we still continue to do that today. So I think how quickly people were able to work differently was surprising, and we did a lot of things during the pandemic, and I think we were just fortunate. I can't say anything more than fortunate. We had finished our strategic plan right before the pandemic, and so we had a roadmap for the year. And so people just kept executing against that roadmap, which was restructuring our sales force, marketing. There were a lot of changes going on, creating new products, and they just kept running, but remotely and effectively. And I'm so proud of how everyone responded. And now going forward, I think we're going to work differently in the future.
Jim, you have had so much experience in a lot of the fresh food industries, particularly produce. How would you answer that question about the things that really caught you off guard the most?
I think what I was really impressed with was the ability of the food service distribution sector to just turn on a dime. When their business just disappeared almost overnight, all of a sudden they were looking for opportunities, and it meshed with a moment at retail when retailers desperately needed help. So you have like Acme down in Philadelphia went to Baldor, a big distributor in New York, and said, what can we do together? And the two of them wound up using Baldor's warehouses, trucks, and things to handle fresh produce, so that the Acme warehouses and things and their trucks could be used to handle this overflowing demand for face masks and sanitizer and all these other things. Nationally, big companies like Cisco, you see 100 stories like that. And so I think on the industry side, that was what really impressed me, that they were able to make those changes. Another interesting thing, and it sort of relates to something you taught me, Ed, years ago. You used to give presentations and show a chart how for basically 100 years, a higher and higher percentage of consumer food dollar was being spent on food service rather than retail. Well, one of the things that happened when all the restaurants closed in America, it turned out a lot of people still didn't know how to cook their food. And you'd had this boom develop, of course, with delivery dudes and Uber Eats and all of these very, very quickly. And to see the way that the consumer wanted to continue with the habits that they were used to was also a very impressive thing. And in my mind, bodes well post-pandemic for the idea that the food service sector will come back strong.
Well, Mike, that leads right back to you. When your business is 75% food service and that portion of the industry closes down, how do you respond?
Yeah, it was very difficult. We had to shut down. We were not able to run because we had no orders coming in. And the unusual thing, Ed, is, typically we keep a couple of weeks of inventory on hand. That 2 weeks of inventory became like 6 months worth of inventory, so we were very concerned for our customers. But bottom line is, it was very interesting, I think, to Jim's point, to see the leaders in the food service industry surface, and the ones that figured it out and got customers coming back to them. And then fortunately enough for us, we are suppliers for some of those food service customers that figured it out and began to get customers back.
Todd, Jim also mentioned delivery of food. I think at Schnook's you've got a couple of different delivery services, and one of them is Instacart, which is partnered with grocers across the country and world. Instacart is now valued at something like $40 billion. So more than every single one of its customers, probably except Walmart. How does that feel to partner with a delivery service like that that's 10 times larger than your family company?
Well, we've actually had a pretty good partnership with Instacart, and have been able to do some things and look to the future and develop some different options as to how we address that. So we haven't seen that as being a negative. One of the benefits of being a regional chain is you've got some flexibility and you can be maybe a little bit more nimble, and so you can take advantage of working with somebody like an Instacart. We're also working with DoorDash, and we started working with them actually on floral delivery. But then we've expanded that into, we're now offering our food service products through the DoorDash portal. And so, we've got people ordering our fried chicken or our rotisserie chicken or from the wing bar or things like that. And then a new offer that we have, we call restaurant selections in our delis and food service areas. So, the key is trying to figure out how to work with them. instead of looking at them as a threat or an enemy.
So, Todd, just following up on that, a lot of retailers said that as much as 25 to 30% of all their sales during parts of the pandemic were online sales. That's certainly not going to stay that high. At least no one forecasts that right now. What do you see in terms of the continuation of the strength of online sales over the next 12 months or so? I'm imagining it's already coming down.
No, it's our online sales about tripled at the high point. It's come down a little, but not a lot, and then is really sort of steadily growing again. And we think it'll probably maybe double from where it is right now. So I would say not within the next year, but within the next 5 years, 6 years.
Outstanding. Susan, let me switch gears a little bit and ask about something else in the supply chain, and that is with product availability being such a challenge over the last year, a lot of historical retailer-supplier relationships were disrupted. Product wasn't available, it wasn't available at the right times and the right SKUs and so on. Creating, I think, a lot of opportunities for companies that didn't know that each other existed 14 months ago. I'm imagining that's had to have an impact. Is that a positive thing or a negative thing for your business?
Yes, so it's a great question. I think if you were in the store and on shelf and the consumer wanted a type of product and their normal product wasn't there, one, it gave them the desire to try something new and maybe stick with it if they liked it better, because whatever was available is what you might purchase. And so I think that really helped if you were in stock to get people to try your products, there's no doubt. So that's been, I know we've had very different Tale of Two Cities from many different suppliers, and I think the issues have transitioned and changed throughout the pandemic. Early on, I think it was just the shock of the volume and trying to get back on course. We actually were pretty good in the beginning. We had enough inventory. For whatever reason, we were maybe a little heavy, and that really played into us being available. But then as the pandemic wore on, different issues surfaced. So one you talked about was raw material supply, whether it be product or it be packaging. And then in the last 4 months, probably, it's been a freight issue where there's port jams, there's a Suez Canal, and there's so many other things. So there's not been one level of disruption. There's been many disruptions and incremental cost, to be honest, across the plane. And I'm sure people are seeing lots of price increases out there on food right now.
So we're getting a lot of questions from the fairly vast audience around the world that we have today. Todd, one of them is, given all of the safety measures that you've very appropriately operationalized in the last year or so, are you a little nervous about the extra distance now that your employees have to remain from the customers? Are you losing a personal touch in the store, and do you have plans on how to address that?
Well, you have the physical barrier, but you still have the connection and the personality of your team. We provided T-shirts to all our teammates, and it said "Spread kindness, not germs" on the front, and then
that's good.
On the back, please respect social distancing. So, we were trying to send a message that, well, even though we have masks, even though we have the physical barriers, we're still looking to do everything that we can to make sure that we've got a great relationship with our customers.
Terrific. Hey, Mike, one of the biggest issues today for many businesses, not just the food industry, but I think it impacts the food industry pretty severely in many cases, is finding labor. Unemployment has been at historic lows in many places, partly as a result of government intervention and so on. But has that been an issue for your business, and how have you addressed it?
Yeah, it's been a huge issue. Ed, we had an issue last year because there were a lot of people that were sick and out and unable to come to work. And then as things picked back up and the economy got better, it got even worse. So, Susan, we were talking about that before we got on this morning, but it absolutely is a problem. It continues to be a problem. And I'm not sure how this is going to get resolved because a lot of the needs, especially me on the manufacturing side, are jobs. I mean, hourly jobs that we need people to pack our food and do packaging and get the processes in place. So for me at this point in time, we're looking at more automation. I mean, we have to because we don't have a choice in the matter, and I just don't see it getting better, especially on the unskilled labor side.
Mike, I also know that you have a reputation for being somewhat of a data analytics guy. Are you embarking on some of the new technologies and artificial intelligence, machine learning, that kind of thing at the processing level?
We're looking at it, Ed. There's a lot of new technology out, especially in manufacturing. So it's been there for years. But for one, it's becoming a little bit more affordable, which is key. And then secondly, more availability of it. So we're in conversations constantly on that. And my engineering team, I've tasked them with finding automation because this is, the question of maintaining cost and to be competitive is huge. And if you're unable to maintain those costs, that you can't get the necessary throughput out, then your costs, they just creep up. So we have to find a solution to it. And again, if I thought there were a lot of availability of more labor out there, we'd go after it. But we are using temp agencies. We've got so many people out hiring. And there's so much competition, and the more the industry booms, it seems like the less people there are available to hire. And I think that's a good thing overall. I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think we're going to have to be more innovative to find solutions on that. And my answer so far on it has been to do more automation.
Excellent. Jim, a listener asks if you'd be willing to opine a little bit on what you think is going to happen in the produce industry, given the lessons learned by the produce industry from the COVID pandemic, and in particular the effects of the COVID that may happen with consumer consumption.
Produce was actually an interesting product at retail. Although supermarkets had tremendous increases, and pretty much in the first few weeks of the pandemic, anything you could get in the store was selling. Overall, produce has not seen the same increases that you've seen in some areas, presumably because it's perishable and people wanted to come to stores less. They were interested in having canned goods and frozen items and things that they knew they could store longer. Due to uncertainty, perishable products just weren't the hot thing of the day. Of course, produce sales went up at retail, but probably not as much as they went down at food service. I think that going out of this pandemic, there's sort of two big questions. One is how quickly the food service sector will respond, and that will guide a lot of what happens in the production area. Food service, much more than retail, is really heavily focused on potatoes, lettuce, onions, and tomatoes. So under like 80% of all the produce used in food service is just those four products. Retail is much more diverse. And of course, this means that the producers in those products have had big dilemmas during the course of the pandemic. I think that the produce industry obviously has had issues on the growing side. One question is the admission of labor into the U.S. A lot of our products are picked by people coming in on special programs, legal or maybe even illegally. And though that was much tougher during the pandemic, we got much stricter. So how the industry is going to wind up responding to that depends a lot, I think, on how the whole situation evolves, how the government reacts to immigrants, how consumers go back to restaurants.
Excellent. Hey, Susan, I have a different topic, and that is the supply chain. Or maybe that's not a different topic. We've been talking about it in different ways. But what I'm referring to now is for years, I guess I have to say decades, we've had an obsession with just-in-time delivery in the supply chain, really worldwide. It reduces cost, it reduces inventory, it reduces handling, it's more cost efficient in most cases. This is particularly true, of course, in dry grocery products, not quite as much in fresh food. Vendor managed inventory, all those things and buzz phrases that have been with us for decades have now been thrown into question when maybe it makes a little sense to have more of a buffer stock than we would have expected 14 months ago. How is that? What's your perception on that change?
Yeah, it's such a great question, because I would tell you, I'm sitting here in France, as you know, right now, and I'm getting a question from one of our brands about should we have had more inventory. But I think there's a different way to approach it. The question is, and I don't want to, is how do we get information to help us react more quickly so that we get ahead of it? And in our particular specialty world, there's a lot of steps in the chain. So you have the consumer, you have the retailer, you have the distributor who may have many, many warehouses, and then you have us bringing it in or stuff coming from wherever it comes from the manufacturer. And so the information has to be robust and has to be really quick. And we need immediacy on that to be able to optimize between how much inventory we do carry and ensuring we're in stock. And I think during the pandemic, it's really highlighted that. And I know for us, we've built a lot of new systems to ensure that our service levels remain strong. But again, we still don't want to hold a lot of inventory, although we may take positions on certain items which we know must be in stock. So I think we balance that off. But I think in the end, to answer your question, it's still about better and better information and ensuring that we are looking at it much more frequently than in the past.
Thanks, Susan. Great perspective. Todd, you heard what Susan just said, but you also have had to address a lot of consumer angst and exasperation over the last year because they can't find certain things on their shelf that they're used to finding on your shelf. Can you imagine increasing at some considerable amount your distribution center capacities?
Well, we frankly are looking right now at potentially expanding our distribution center. Part of that is due to the availability of new products and different products. But part of it is, what are our supply needs? I think what Susan said, one of the key things is there's got to be just a great interchange between the suppliers and the retailers and using the information, because goodness knows that the retailer can collect an amazing amount of information, through the scanning system. So, utilizing that and being able to really target, where does a certain product really work? Maybe not in every store, but it certainly could be in a subset of stores. And it's going to be increasingly important to share that information and collaborate as we go forward.
Todd, let me stick with you for a minute. A listener just asked the following question. As many consumers were introduced for the first time to a lot of the variety and quality in the frozen food department, because maybe certain fresh foods weren't available, and retailers certainly experienced that spike in sales across the country in the frozen departments. Did you see that, and do you expect it to continue?
Well, in frozen in particular, yes, because I think that over the past few years, the innovation that has come about in that area has been pretty strong. And, there are a lot of just new and different products, different food styles, things like that people can expand their horizons. I think that one of the things that's been really interesting to me and how I think it's going to affect this, our industry going forward is that this really forced people to learn how to cook. There were people that were, on such a go-go lifestyle. Many of our younger customers really don't know how to cook, and they do now. And the other side of it is I think that they've really learned how much more affordable eating in is versus eating out. So
Jim, that was a great answer, Todd. Jim, I wonder how you respond from a fresh produce industry perspective. Per capita consumption of produce has not really grown much in the last couple of years, despite all of the publicity about how healthy it is for us. Do you see the possibility of fresh produce consumption going down because consumers are now more enamored with the innovation in the frozen department?
It's a problem, of course. The more product that is available that's better in frozen is strong competition for fresh. However, there's a lot of things that people still enjoy about engaging with fresh food. It still has an excellent reputation for health, and the variety of fresh produce is tremendously expanded, not only in terms of the items, but you look at a product like Love Beets or something that takes a product like a beet, but flavors it and does things like that to it. And I think our very definition of fresh is changing so that in our fresh departments, we have a lot more stuff that's been pre-cut, that has flavor added to it, that has dips added to it. So we're not really just selling in our fresh produce departments, here's a raw beet, go cook it. We're doing a lot of other things, and I think that has a lot of opportunity for the produce industry and for consumers to enjoy fresh produce in the future. I also think, if I could add one more thing, I think that retailers are likely to change. Stores do a fantastic job, but one thing that I've certainly learned in my family, we started ordering a lot of things online, and I doubt we're ever going to be going into supermarkets and buying, cases of water that we used to have to lug home. We've learned that those type of heavy industry things are better served through a delivery service. So I suspect that retailers like the new stores that Todd is building are likely to more heavily emphasize fresh. And that's going to be an opportunity for produce, for deli, seafood, bakery, et cetera.
Yeah, I'm sorry, if I could just...
Go ahead.
I wouldn't say that we've had a decrease in our produce departments and in our fresh side. I think it's because the volume that we picked up, because people didn't have the alternative of restaurants. That is really what has driven the increase in the other departments as well. So I don't see a decrease on the fresh side of the business at all.
Todd, your sales, I don't know them precisely, but if they're anything like the supermarket industry, and I think they are, although you're certainly above the average, like Wobegon, if your same store sales went up, 12, 15, 20%, in large part because there wasn't food available in food service, where 50% of our food dollars were spent before the COVID pandemic. Those numbers, those same-store sales comparisons versus a year ago are undoubtedly, inevitably going to go down. At least that's my strong assumption. I suspect you've already begun to see that. What ideas and innovations are you planning to try to capture some of that growth that you experienced last year?
Well, when we look at sales, we're actually looking at, now we look at 2019 sales, because we just think it doesn't make sense to try and compare against last year. I think that we're going to continue, even as things open up, we'll still be the beneficiary to some degree, because there'll be more work from home. I think, many businesses have determined and recognized that that's not such a bad thing, that, people are actually, can be more productive. Their job satisfaction is higher because they're not commuting. So, there will be people at home that will have to eat. And so, there's some things, so how do you address some of those needs? I think, to get more to your question. But Jim talked about, fresh cuts and things that you're doing in your produce department, different food service items, that we might be doing in our deli department, or value added. People are, seafood is an area that has grown in our business, because most people would, they'd go out and eat seafood. So if they wanted to continue to get seafood, they had to either learn how to cook it, or, in our store, for instance, we'll cook seafood for the customer for free. But, that business has been good. And then the floral business has been good, because people were sitting around their house and they wanted to have something to freshen it up. So every week they went out, they've been out buying, fresh flowers. So it's really it's adapting to, what are the lifestyle changes, and looking to see how you can fulfill some of those needs.
Terrific. Hey, Mike, let me return to something that you said in your introduction. If I'm interested in meatballs and bacon, you're my guy. But you're also embarking, I think, on plant protein. Yes. And partnerships with Beyond Meat, other plant protein products, perhaps. I'm also seeing lots of interest in that sector, and I wonder how crowded it's getting, and whether what you think the outlook for that sector of the business is.
Yeah, I'm a believer in it. I think it's a great. I think alternative meats are fantastic. I think there are some that are better than others. But I think that the technology there, and the switch to pea protein, for example, has been a huge help. Just figuring out the texture, and the mouthfeel, the eatability of that. So I think it's going to continue to grow. In my opinion, it will never take over meat. I think meat will be here and will stay. But for those that want to have an alternative meat product, they've come such a long way. I just think it's a huge part of the industry, and it's only going to get bigger and better as people figure this thing out now.
Yeah, and Mike, I was going to say we're working in that space as well, and we think of it as flexitarians, people who eat meat, who eat plant-based, and really are open to all. And we actually had launched Good Catch, which is fish-free tuna. We then launched Cool Beans last year, which is a frozen plant-based gluten-free wrap. Now we have Valsoya, which is plant-based gelato, and we're launching Cutting Veg in July, which is really meant to be veggie forward, not fake meat, as we call her, faux meat. And so we believe that's an area, but we're really looking at how do we get everyone to engage and eat in this way, and not just people who might be vegan, or vegetarian. So lots of opportunity there.
Right. I agree with you, Susan. It's a great, healthy lifestyle to be able to indulge in both, to be honest with you. I feel real good about it. And that flexitarian label, to your point, yeah, I'm one. I think it's a great place to be.
Susan, getting back to the point you just made, with so many products being out of stock on most retailers' shelves over the last year, and it varied depending on the time of the pandemic you investigated it, a lot of analysts believe that the big brands, the big consumer packaged goods companies with large portfolios benefited because consumers were familiar with their name, and that the specialty products and the smaller brands were at a big disadvantage. You're sort of in the middle of that space. What was your experience?
Well, for us, it was an exceptionally strong banner year for us. So we actually had a lot of success last year. But I think
why is that?
Well, I think we still had some brands that are still, even though they're specialty, Beaumont's number 2 in the category, Tiling, Chinese, ethnic was growing. It did exceptionally well. We're number 1 in artichokes. And so, 1, I think we were in stock. 2, we still had brands that people used and things people wanted to try. And 3, we really continued to engage in our consumer marketing, our social media, and teach recipes and how to make different exciting meal preparations. So I think the consumer engagement was so important this year, while people were particularly home and even looking more and more. And I think Todd mentioned it too, the cooking. People learned to cook. And so I think that was important. I think what didn't happen last year, though, was it was much harder to get new items on shelf because no one really wanted to, 1, take new item presentations, and 2, reset any shelves. Todd's laughing at me. That's true. And so we're seeing that open up a lot now, and we're doing a lot of new item presentations in the first quarter of the year. It's really started and it's accelerating. So we're very hopeful that it'll open up this year and people will be willing to bring new things in. But, last year was not a year for new items.
Todd, Susan caught you smiling there. And I'm sort of wondering, as a lot of retailers said, we might be out of the lime marinated, skinless, boneless chicken thighs this week. We're not going to be out of broilers, or we're not going to be out of, chicken fillets. So focus on the basics, not so much on the extra fancy products. Can you imagine, first of all, I don't know to what extent that was true at Schnook's in terms of a survival strategy, but can you imagine one of the results of the pandemic being a permanent reduction in your SKU count?
Yes, but no. I think what will change is maybe the variety in sizes and the variety and sort of some of the knockoffs. But I don't think that there'll be a reduction in assortment when it comes to the types of products that Susan carries, because it's as people learned how to cook, they got tired of making the same 4 dishes that they knew how to cook, that they only had to make every other week, in their previous lifestyle. Now they're experimenting. And so now they want to look for some of the ethnic foods and some of the specialty foods, and, how do they dress things up a little bit? So, I think the ability to reduce some of those, size varieties will allow us, and some of the manufacturers, frankly, are cutting down on the varieties that they used to offer because they couldn't keep up with their main items, so they had to cut back on that. So I think variety will go up, but I think, as I said, not to be redundant, but some of the size variety will go down. And I think one of the things that will also come more into account is retailers really looking at, all right, what's their holding capacity on shelf? And then working with manufacturers to say, okay, we need to have a more efficient case, the shelf-ready case, so that we can get it and we can put it on the shelf and we can, move on. Because as Mike was talking about, labor is tough to find right now. And so anything that, we can be doing to help with that while helping address, the wants and needs of our customers will be really important.
Terrific. Hey, Jim, trade associations permeate every industry, I suppose, in every industrial sector, and the food industry is no exception. In the food industry, there's trade associations in meat and cheese and dairy and grocery and produce. And part of your business, and one of the key features and advantages of these associations is how they're able to get buyers and sellers together, usually face-to-face in annual conventions where all sorts of ideas are exchanged and deals are made, and people come away excited about new programs and technologies. And part of your business has been to offer venues for such gatherings. What do you suppose is going to happen to the trade conference venues and meetings in the future, and will consumers feel, or will industry practitioners be comfortable in coming back to those settings?
It's interesting, Ed. We did our events this past year, as almost everyone did, virtually, and our attendance at the events was up fivefold. Now, partly that was because we made a decision to make it free to allow people to attend, partly because we got loads of people from China, from Africa, from Europe, from South America that probably wouldn't have made the investment to fly to New York and stay in hotels. But it is true that they were not the same type of things. The presentations and workshops, they were off the charts in attendance. Booths are much more difficult to calibrate going into individual booths, whereas when people go to a normal live trade show, they walk down the aisle maybe to see one person they intended to see, and they just happen to see some guy who worked for an old company they knew. They get waved at by a friend, and so they inadvertently create connections and things like this. As we're going back to live events now, we have a mix of things. I can tell you we've done a lot of surveying in this area, and people actually tell us they're extremely anxious to get back to these live events, that it's not just a matter of buying and selling, it's the relationship building and things that are absolutely crucial to their business and their lives. You work with people for 20, 30 years, you might become friends with them. And so there's all this type of stuff that's really driving people to want to come to live events. Now, we do have some questions. How easy it will be for international travelers to come back. And some of the big retailers, to be honest, were happy to not have to pay to send people. And some of them are looking to hold back on that situation too. How quickly that will all happen is hard to judge, but certainly the response by 90% numbers, like you never see, is that most people do want to come. They do say, though, that they're limited sometimes. If they're working at home, their lives may change. Maybe they don't have childcare arranged, and they're relying on their being at home, things like that. So how that's all going to evolve is difficult to say, but certainly every survey, every research piece we've seen says people want to be in live contact again. And to what Susan and Todd have mentioned, if people are actually working from home more, they may have more desire to travel occasionally to go see people and be in live venues because they're not having an interactive experience in an office every day.
Thanks, Jim. We only have a few minutes left, and I'm sensing as I pick up the newspaper and just look out my window every day that the economy and the world is starting to open back up. I'd like to ask all of you the extent to which you think your business and how closely your business is today to where it was before the pandemic? In other words, my assumption is it's moving back towards some sense of new normalcy. I wondered the extent to which you agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say we're not quite yet to pre-COVID levels, but I would tell you we're moving in the right direction. And I think as the country opens up and people continue to get out, they will not only impact food service segment, but they will also continue to impact retailers. And so I see both segments, both industries continuing to grow. And then, and I think our business will get back to pre-COVID levels. I think we're on our way, but not quite there yet.
I would say, I would hope that our business does not get back to pre-COVID levels. Then we would continue to run, increased sales. But, I think we are. I think we are getting close to that new normal. And our business has changed in ways that we'll never go back to being what we were before. And just a simple example of we went to try and maintain social distancing. We went to single line queuing at all of our front ends. And it turns out the customers loved it because they said there's no longer any angst as far as, do I get in this lane or get in this lane? They get to the front of the line, they go right to the checkout and they're good to go. So, a simple example of just some things that, I think all of us are just doing things differently. And I know we'll never go back to how we did things, pre-COVID.
I was going to say, I also think that COVID actually sped up some things, and some things that existed before will come back. So e-com, clearly we accelerated the growth and explosion of e-com probably 3-4 years faster than we would have all thought. But I think things like ghost kitchens and meal kits and all the different forms of e-com, what I'll call the pure plays, like the Misfit Foods and the Boxed and all the others exploded. And I think we're going to see a bigger variety of e-commerce solutions and meal kits. But I do believe food service will grow quickly because that was a trend growing, and I think we're out-of-home consumers. But I do think it depends on the occasion. So I think the breakfast occasion will actually be very strong at home, which it wasn't as much before because people are going to work from home more. So I think there's some trends that will change, but I think there's ones that were in progress, whether we want to eat healthier. I think those will continue to grow, and I look forward to innovation and new opportunities.
Ed, I think that Susan's exactly right in many of the things that she just brought up. But I think it's also true that every one of these things has sort of knockdown effects that we haven't planned for. So people who might be more homebound, for example, they're also going to be the people who say, I want to go on more vacations, or I want to go on more exotic vacations. And so each one of these is going to have multiple effects that we're just starting to sort of guess at. And some things have to go back because the world goes back. I've heard people say, oh, look, I've done all these sales without having to go visit my customers. Wasn't this fantastic? We'll do that forever. Right up till their competitor now is going to go visit the customer, and they start losing orders and then they'll realize, oh, I guess I have to get out and see them too. So the world we're entering, I think, is very exciting, actually. The last great pandemic, the flu pandemic that we had at the early part of the last century, it led to the Roaring '20s. And who would have seen out of such despair such an exciting and uplifting time? And I think that we're going to see that as well here. We've had a chance for people to stay home. They've become richer, ironically, during this pandemic because they weren't spending money like they did before, because they got government checks like they never got before. Although certainly some people have been hurt severely, for most people, they didn't get fired and they didn't spend money. So they're richer and ready to launch in a new world of excitement. And I think that we are going to move into a world that is really going to create new opportunities for the food industry and for all people. So I'm sort of optimistic.
Well, Jim, on that very positive, enthusiastic, optimistic note, I think it's about ready time to complete this outstanding panel discussion. The hour sped by for me, and I hope for others. We owe an enormous debt of gratitude to the four of you for taking the times out of what I know are incredibly hectic schedules to be with us today. So thanks very much to the four panelists. Outstanding discussion and conversation. Thanks very much for the people joining us around the world. Please take care of yourselves and stay safe.